this is activist research. This doesn't seem to be research that is sound and dispassionate. It seems to have a predetermined idea, because we look at the experience, as Rowan said, around the world, countries that are further down the renewables road than we are, and the cost ain't going down. In fact, the other thing's happening, and we need baseload power. At the end of the day, wind and solar ain't going to give us baseload power. So where is the addressing of those fairly critical issues in this report?
Well, it's ignoring it. You know, it's bleeding obvious to everyone that's been involved in the energy system for long. It's not just me making this up. We've had a group of 10 concerned scientists and engineers write. We've had Adi Patterson writing, Stephen Wilson, Aidan Morrison. That article by Claire Lehman encapsulated all those arguments. They basically have ignored it and ignored the ramifications for the integrated system plan, which is AEMO's plan for the future. It's all based on misinformation. And you're right, Rita, it is activist reports. You know, they give the same time for a new build for a solar plant as for a coal plant, but a coal plant or a nuclear will last 60, 80 years.
Exactly, James.
So they...
Yeah, and I mean, look, let's be really explicit about this. It's very technical, but when Chris Bowen gets up and he says in Parliament smugly that renewables are the cheapest form of energy, well, he's lying, right? Because explain to us what they have missed. And we were speaking earlier about the sunk costs of things that they don't take into account. And the other part of it has to be, of course, you know, even if nuclear is more expensive, well, if you're saving the planet, surely cost isn't an issue.
Yes. What they fail to consider is the system costs. They talk about energy generation alone, but you don't just get your power in your toaster or your oven from a wind turbine right next door. It comes through a grid. Now, the grid costs go up exponentially with renewables, because you need to build, you know, 23,000 kilometres of new grid transmission. You have to have new transmission, frequency control, all those things. 45% of your bill now is grid and transmission costs, and they're going to quadruple that. And that's David, why things are going up.
David, you're a Nationals MP. You represent, you know, rural Australia, the bush, etc. I was down in Canberra recently. You'll have seen those hideous transmission lines along Hindmarsh Drive there, these massive, great things. Now, people, farmers, constituents of yours, can look forward to having these things through their paddocks, across their gardens. That's what's happening, because under net zero, doesn't matter if you object or not, it's going through. We've seen in the snow, we've seen all sorts of complaints. So tell us the feedback you're getting from from your constituents.
Look, there's red hot anger. There's no social licence for them to turn up and wipe out all the normal regulatory processes like the environmental assessment. They're bribing people, giving them hundreds of thousands of dollars to put these unnecessary power lines through for these phantom solar projects that haven't even been built. And wind turbines. And all those grid and transmission costs, they're going to quadruple your bill. People are crawling over hot coals to come to Australia, invest their money, because they are going to get a regulated asset base return. So a solar farm only works 20% of the time on average, but they will be getting paid a fixed amount. Now, the whole grid is worth $29 billion now, and on Chris Bowen's figures, there's about $60 billion at least of investment. So there's going to be a regulated return for all those owners. It's an investment for grid owners. It's not an investment for cheap electricity.
No.
Well, no, and you're seeing these ugly solar farms going up. If you fly between Melbourne and Sydney, they're just absolutely spoiling the landscape where they're installed. These panels are coming from China, I presume. How long do they last? Where do we dispose of them? All those sort of questions seem to be disregarded. It just seems like, never mind the cost, never mind what goes into these panels, we're going to invest billions in them.
Well, the investors are going to invest billions in it, and they're going to get a return from your electricity bill.
Yeah.
That's what people don't understand. It's a grid for investors. It's not a grid for people using electricity. It's very, very expensive, and it will be clipped onto your ticket that your retail provider will give you. And it's the same with wind farms. You know, around Walker, they're turning that pristine country into an industrial park, 550 wind turbines in North Queensland. They're ploughing through proposed rainforests and remnant vegetation. If a farmer was knocking down one tree, he'd be in trouble.
He'd be in jail, yeah,
And,
exactly.
and they have just been given a leave pass by all these things. But it's destroying our grid stability. It needs inertia and frequency and voltage control, which a power station does. And if we're going to deindustrialise or defossilise our industry, the thing with nuclear, it not only generates electricity, it generates industrial heat. So a lot of processes that we do in Australia, heavy industry, can use the industrial heat. And solar panels and wind never give that.
So is the coalition, is Peter Dutton going to come out with a coal to nuclear plan, a solid plan that is going to take to the election? Because we're hearing hints about it, but are we actually going to see
There's good reason.
formulated plan?
There's good reasons there's hints about it, because people like me and all these engineers have been doing exactly that all around the world. But we are the last of a kind. We're not the first of a kind. We're the last of a kind. The rest of the world has worked out this experiment in Canada, in Europe, in the UK, with relying on wind and solar generated, puts your sovereignty at the whim, not only of the weather, but most of this renewable stuff is made in China and elsewhere.
Puts us at the mercy of China, 100%. Dr. David Gillespie, great to have you on as always, and thanks for warning us about what's coming down the road and coming to a property near you. Unless you speak up, the Nationals are onto it. Shame Labor aren't.